Hey there, welcome to Board Game Hot Takes, the podcast where we give our immediate reactions to the hottest board games just minutes after playing them. My name's Tim.
And this is Chris.
This is Adam.
And tonight, instead of giving our hot take review of a game we just finished playing, we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive into the Board Game Geek top 100 games of all time. We're going to take a little bit of a look at how many games each of us have played, and then talk about games that we're excited to try, even though we haven't yet, but also talk about some games that we just don't have any interest in playing, even though we have never tried them. And, kind of delve in a little bit about what gets us excited about games. So that's coming up really quickly. But before we do, I'm going to talk about a poll question that I'm going to link into this topic a little bit. So the poll question I asked on Twitter this week was, which range of years were the golden age of hobby board games so far? The most great games published during those years. I asked this question because one of our listeners reached out and suggested talking about what was the greatest year of all time in board gaming. But it was a hard question to put into a Twitter poll with just 4 options. So what I did is I kind of looked at the top 100 and said, how many games came from what time ranges? And the vast majority of the games came from the last 12 years or so. So I just split it up into 4 ranges. So the poll options were the years 2011 to 2013, 2014 to 2016, 2017 to 2019, and 2020 to 2022. So those are the 4 poll options I gave. I don't know if this was a good way to ask this question, but no, Adam's shaking his head. It was not a good way to ask the question. And it wasn't easy. It wasn't an easy question to ask. But what I'm going to do here is for listeners, I'm going to tell you what the top 5 games, according to Board Game Geek, were ranked in each of those time slots. And then tell me if that changes your answer. So Chris and Adam, I'm interested to hear if after you hear this, if your answer has changed from the option I gave originally. So
I'm dying to hear the list.
All right. So from 2011 to 2013, these were the top 5 games according to Board Game Geek ranking. Number 1, War of the Rings 2nd Edition. Number 2, The Castles of Burgundy. Number 3, Concordia. Number 4, Terra Mystica. And number 5, Mage Knight board game. So that's the top 5 games from that time frame.
What was the time frame again?
This is 2011 to 2013.
Okay, got it.
Okay, so from 2014 to 2016, we got some pretty big hits here. In this range, the top 5 games were Pandemic Legacy Season 1. Number 2 was Terraforming Mars. Number 3 was Star Wars Rebellion. Number 4 was Through the Ages, A New Story of Civilization. And number 5 was Great Western Trail. So some pretty heavy hitters in that range. In the range of 2017 to 2019, the top 5 games according to Board Game Geek. Number 1, Gloomhaven, which is considered the number 1 game of all time. Number 2, Brass Birmingham. Number 3, Twilight Imperium 4th Edition. Number 4, Gaia Project. And number 5, Spirit Island. So lots of great games we've had, right? But then listen to this last one. From 2020 to 2022, this is the top ranked games. Pretty recent, right? Shouldn't even be that many in here. We've got Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion. Number 2, Ark Nova. Number 3, Dune Imperium. Number 4, Eclipse Second Dawn for the Galaxy. And number 5, Lost Ruins of Arnak. So even in just the last few years, and I felt like this range had a disadvantage because we haven't even made it to the end of 2022 at this point. So there's a lot of great games that have the potential to come out still this year. We're not even kind of in the award season segment. So with all that said, how did you guys vote on this? And after listening to those lists, would it change your answer?
Well, I'm going to give 2 answers. One was my gut reaction answer to your question, which is what I actually put in the poll. And my second is my real answer, the more accurate answer. So my gut reaction to this was the 2017 or whatever. I think whatever that time range that fell in. And I think a lot of the reason for that is, let me take a step back. So I've read this theory that people are most nostalgic for the period of time shortly before they were born. And the idea there is that they think of this lovely, simple time when they were right before they were children, and then they were children and everything was, kind of hunky-dory, and there were no problems in the world. And so I think I kind of applied the same thing here in that when I started playing games seriously, probably in around the 2018, 2017 range, the games that I was seeing or the games that I knew of were the games in that time frame. So I think that's where I hit. But hearing the list, especially now, I think the real answer is that there is no golden age. That all of these ranges have great games in them. Like every time you start reading a list, I'm like, or you started going through the years, I was like, oh yeah, well clearly that's going to be the one. And then you do the next one, like, well no, clearly that's going to be the one because there's just so many good games out there, and there's such a spread over time.
Yeah, Chris, you kind of stole my answer there. I was going to say, you know what? I'm the cool guy. I don't have to categorize myself. But no, you're totally right. I'm going back and looking. You could take any couple year chunk, I think, and be like, oh, those games are amazing. Look at those. So I just took like 20, I wanted to go old school in quotes, 2000 to like 2011 before Tim's little list. And then there you got War of the Ring, Twilight Struggle, Castles of Burgundy, Brass Lancashire, Mage Knight, Puerto Rico. I mean, so the list goes on and on of all these amazing games. Maybe I'm sure that's a lot of people's golden years right there, board games. I think in the poll I put 2015, 2017, was that even an answer? 2014, 2016? I don't even know what I put in the poll. I don't even think that was legit. I just picked something. I wanted to see what other people said. That's why I just picked an answer. So that's my answer for this poll.
Yeah, this was a tough one for me. Again, it wasn't an easy question to think about because it's hard even to just like assess what all came out in the range. But Chris, I totally agree with you. I think people do get nostalgic for the time that they're really starting to get into something. I think this happens with music too. Like I know so many people who are in their 30s, 40s, even 50s, but they're stuck in high school. The music that they were really into in high school and college when they were really, like sitting in the dorm room, just like, jamming out to music all semester long. And then they're still listening to that stuff. And they're like, this is the best time that we ever had music. And I think that happens with games as well. So my instinct was to say that, like 2015 to 2017 range, or 2014 to 2017, because when I was first getting in, it was about 2016, 17. And the greatest games of all time were coming out at that time. The games that really blew me away: Terraforming Mars, Scythe, right? Orleans, Blood Rage. These were some of the first games that I was getting into and falling in love with. And so it's hard to say like that wasn't the best era for me. But I have to say that I still think that we're heading into a golden age. I think that games are, learning from, designers are learning from past efforts, and they're producing things. Looking at this 2020 to 2022 list, Dune Imperium, Ark Nova, Eclipse Second Dawn, Lost Ruins of Arnak. I mean, these are some of my favorite games of all time. And one of the reasons why I love them so much is that they're not only great mechanically, but they've all put theme into these games, right? We're starting to get away from the era of brown, boring Euros about just, medieval cities. And these are all cool themes, and these are the top rated games from this era. And I think we're going to see more and more of that. I think games like Wingspan kind of blew open the space of what you could put a theme on a game. And so I think that we're still moving into that era personally. But right now I'm pretty excited about how things have progressed. And if you think about this time frame that we're talking about, like 2020, 2021 was supposed to be some of the worst years for published games because COVID really messed up publishers' schedules. Release schedules were changed because conventions weren't happening. Shipping has been a problem. So we probably would have even had more great games in these last few years if things had gone in a normal world. So just think of what's coming over the next few years, and all the people that got introduced to games the last few years are now future designers that, we just blew up this space. So I think that we still have a lot of opportunity to grow and find our golden age. But so far I'm pretty happy with where things are sitting right now. So here's how people answered on the poll though. And I think probably speaks a lot to what Chris was saying. Out of the four options I gave, 2011 to 2013, only 13% said that. 2014 to 2016, 25% said that. 2017 to 2019 was 42%, and 2020 to 2022 was 20%. So that 2017 to 2019, it's hard to argue with. 42% sitting in lots of great games there, but probably a lot of people kind of coming into the hobby at that time as well. I did want to read just a couple responses to this poll. Now, if you don't follow us on Twitter, you can find us there at BG_hot takes. Come out, chat with us on there. We're very interactive with our listeners and with the other people on Twitter, but we also put these polls out every week. So if you go out and listen to it, you're welcome to come on there, respond to the poll, give your own feedback, but also leave some comments, and we often leave them on the poll. Now, this is a fun one to read. There weren't a ton of responses, but you get to hear some of the reasons why people pick certain eras. But I did want to read one response because I knew this was going to happen. I knew somebody was going to say, we're way past the golden age. The golden age would have been way back when, right? And of course, I did get one of those responses. So this is Mark the Thoughtful Gamer, who's a board game reviewer as well. He has a YouTube channel and a blog. But his question, he said nothing from before 2011. So I asked him, I was like, is there a 3-year segment pre-2011 that you think was the golden age of board games? He said, typically golden age is used to describe a boom of creative, innovative work. So in American film, people point to the mid-late 30s and the post-Hays Code film of the late 60s, early 70s. So for board games, it's got to be something like 92, 95, yeah? 100% disagree on that. I think there was some innovations that happened at that time that was a forerunner for current era, but I decided to do some research. And so I looked up that time frame as well. I'm going to read the top 5 games from 92 to 95, according to Board Game Geek users. And I want you guys to tell me if you think that this was the golden era of board games. So number 1 from 92 to 95 was El Grande. This is sitting at number 85 on the BGG top list of all time. Great game. We've played it. We reviewed it on the show. Number 2, Magic the Gathering. Can't argue with that. Probably one of the most innovative and groundbreaking games of all time. Still a huge hit. Number 3, sitting at number 220 on the list, is Modern Art. Reiner Knizia classic. Chris is making a sad face right there. Number 4 is Pitch Car. You guys played Pitch Car? No, of course you haven't.
No.
Number 5 is Blood Bowl 3rd edition from 1994. This is a football-based game in the Warhammer world, I believe. So those are the top 5 games of all time. I don't think that was the golden age. I do have to point out, though, that number 6 on this list is Catan, which was released in 1995. And Catan, I think there's a lot of hate for it just because so many people played it and they've discovered new things. And so it's probably rated lower than it should be based on its impact on the world of hobby gaming. But I think I can definitively say from this list that 1992 to 1995 was not the golden age of gaming. Would you guys agree with that?
I think I can definitively say that you are correct.
I don't know. I think you can make an argument. Magic the Gathering, you said that's like, I don't know, one of the most popular games still, correct? And it's still making new cards and doing new stuff. Catan was one of the games that kind of brought everybody into the whole German design game world and checking that out. Mm-hmm. Pitch Car is a classic. Who hasn't played Pitch Car? No, I can't argue. I can't say much about Pitch Car. But I still often hear Blood Bowl talked about a lot. I think they're still coming out with new editions of that, and the people that love it, they really, really love it, and they're hooked on it. I never played, I never tried it because I wasn't, maybe if I was into gaming back then, maybe I would be into it. But I think there is some shred of an argument that could be made for that era. So
yeah, I think you have to give that era the credit for a lot of what our hobby has today. Like if Magic the Gathering hadn't existed, we probably would have 90% less even hobby game stores because that's where most of the revenue comes from. And if Catan hadn't existed, Euro games would not exist today, right? Like we wouldn't have had an explosion of Euro games that are popular in the United States. So I think we have to give them credit for, changing the gaming landscape. But I still think there's been a lot more innovation and a lot more exciting things that have happened since then. That's my perspective.
Yeah, and to bring it back to the movie analogy, certainly the 30s, that period was great. Lots of things were happening. It was a lot of innovation, but the reality is most people these days don't want to sit around watching movies from the 30s for the most part. They want to watch modern movies. And there's a good reason for that. Times change and tastes change, and really what you consider a golden age, what you consider kind of a peak, is really where your tastes fall.
Yeah. And I wouldn't argue that like today is the golden age of movies necessarily, because I think there's been other market impacts that have changed that, like just trying to put people into seats. And so maybe you're losing some of the creativity in movie filmmaking. But you have to admit that because filmmakers have taken what came before them and the filmmaking techniques and the new technologies that exist now, that there still have been many, many greater movies and many greater eras in movies than the 30s. 60s, 70s, fantastic era in filmmaking. So there's an argument to be made there, but there's at least a lot of opportunity for evolution up to that point. I think we're just getting into the era where we're seeing the best things that could come out of the game design world.
Well, that's the hope, right? That we're standing on the shoulders of the people before us and taking steps to make things better. And I guess the argument can be made when was the greatest leap and this and that, blah, blah, blah. Hopefully everything's just getting incrementally better.
All right, cool. So that will let's talk about the Board Game Geek Top 100 even further, since we've already mentioned several games on there. So what we wanted to do today is there's it's always fun to talk about what are supposed to be the greatest games of all time, just because they're great games to talk about, right? And it's fun to explore them a little bit. And I wanted to think of a way that we could kind of approach a large group of these great games and consider them in a unique way. And so what we're going to do today is basically list out the top 5 games on this list that we haven't played, but we're really excited to, and kind of talk about why they get us excited, why we're interested in them. But then in contrast, right, these are the 100 greatest games of all time, according to the ranking system that Board Game Geek puts in place. And there's also, we're going to talk about 5 games that we really have no interest in playing, even though they're supposed to be some of the greatest games of all time. So I think it'll give you a little bit of an insight into what kind of games we like, what kind of games we get excited about. But also I think it's a fun way to just explore why games get rated highly and how they got to this point. Are you guys familiar with the Board Game Geek rating system? I think we've talked about this on the show before, but do you have a good sense for some of the metrics that are used with it?
You mean that crystal clear, well delineated method of ranking games? Is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah.
It's the close hold system that nobody knows about, and you have to pay, I think it's like $3.5 million if you want the formula for it, something like that.
Yeah, I don't think it's that complicated. So just roughly, I'll give you an idea of what I think I know about it based on years of just reading articles and kind of watching the rankings change. But basically, this is based on user rankings primarily, right? So it's based heavily on how many people rate a game and what rating they give it. And Board Game Geek has a 1 to 10 ranking scale. And so if you go in there, you can rank any game that's in their database and give it your own number ranking. And they have, it's kind of cool because if you go in and look at the numbers in there, it tells you what each of the numbers represent. So if I give a game a 7, I'm contributing to this ranking scale. But it's not perfect, right? Like if 100 people go and rank, a game a 7, it's actually going to be lower than a 7 because Board Game Geek uses a little bit of a game has to have enough rankings to qualify to move up this list. So if 100 people or even 1,000 people come in here and rank a game at 10, it's probably still going to be sitting around like a 7.5 or 7.8. You have to have thousands and thousands of users in here ranking a game to actually get close to the actual user rating in the system. And so what that does is that over time, the more people that play a game, the more useful that ranking becomes. And it's there to prevent the new flash in the pan from everyone, going out and rating the hot new Kickstarter game or whatever.
Except somehow Ark Nova is like in the top 10 already, so I don't get it.
Well, thousands and thousands of ratings of people that have played it and think it's that good. So I think it's using the system the way it's supposed to. It doesn't mean it makes you happy because you didn't think that Ark Nova qualified for the top 11 games of all time. But
I think what I should do is go in and rate it a 1 out of spite. Isn't that what I said to do, Tim?
Yeah, I think my least favorite people in the board gaming hobby are people that go on Board Game Geek and rate games they haven't played a 1 or a 10. Either one. Either one qualifies there. So anyway, that's kind of how the ranking system works. I think there's also a little bit of an algorithm there where if people they get a little bit of a bump the more activity that's happening with that game. So if people stop logging plays, I think it syncs over time. I could be wrong about that, but I get the impression that if a game was really popular at one point and had a really high rating, eventually it will fall if people are no longer playing it. So it kind of keeps the games relevant that are popular.
I think that's got to be in there. Like over time, these games fade away. They just kind of drift into that. So I think there is a time element in there. I have no clue. That's just the sense I get from watching it.
Yeah, that's my guess. The only other thing that could be happening is just that the hobby's grown so much that there's now a lot more people rating games today. So if there's a popular game, it gets a lot more ratings. But I haven't gone and checked total number of ratings to say if that's true or not. But in any case, it does seem like that games will fall off the list if they're no longer being talked about and played and out in the zeitgeist.
For instance, even Gloomhaven and Pandemic Legacy, season number 1 and number 2, those are slowly eroding. If you watch them over the course of the past few months, they're slowly going down. I don't think people are rating them lower. I just think it's part of the algorithm there. But that's just a guess.
Yeah, I think that's true.
And I've heard a lot of complaints from people about, is this really the top 100? Is this really the right ranking system? In reality, I think you have to look at this as not the definitive list of what are the top, games in order. Really what we should be doing is looking at this list and all the BGG rankings and saying, this is a pretty good yardstick of what the community thinks about this game. The same way that you go on Yelp reviews for restaurants. You go on and you see a restaurant that has 50 good reviews, it means it's probably a pretty well-regarded restaurant.
Yeah.
It's the same thing here. If you see something that's in the top 10, the top 100, then it probably means that there's a lot of fans of this game and it probably deserves your attention. If the game is number 20,000, it probably doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. Okay, well, so let's start off by talking about some games that we think deserve our attention. Now, how many games in the top 100 have you guys played? Did you count it up?
I've actually played 38 of them, and I was surprised the number was that high, but when I started going down the list, sure enough, 38.
I'm at 42, and I did a little more in-depth research on this, Tim. I did it by a 25-game segment. So in the top 25, I played 17 out of those. I was pretty surprised at that. The next 25, 13. Then it drops off. From 50 to 75, played only 5 of those, and then only 7 of that last chunk for a total of 42 games out of the top 100. I was extra bored today. I went and looked at 101 through 200.
Teacher's pet.
I've played only 25 in that chunk of games. And then I had a little trouble counting. I still don't know the difference between Architects, Paladins, and Viscounts of the West Kingdom. So some of those I've played, some of those I haven't. So my count might be a little off.
Funny. Yeah. So I actually have played 65 games in the top 100. And then there's a few like first editions that I like where I've only played the second edition, so I didn't count those. So I would say, of games that I've never played any version of it, there's about 32 or 33 that I have not played on this list. So I'm a little ahead of you guys, but not too far, right? We're all kind of like in the middle here. There's a lot of games left to explore in this list. And so that's kind of what got me thinking. Like I look at this list and I'm like, of course I want to play the best games of all time. But then I look at the list and there are many games here that I don't necessarily want to play. But let's go positive first and talk about the games that we are really excited to play.
So before I get started, let me just say a couple things. First of all, I thought this was an incredibly interesting poll for ourselves. And it was really interesting going over the list because, first of all, I had no idea that I'd played 38 of the top 100 games. I hadn't paid that much attention. So it was interesting finding that out. And then really looking at that and saying, these games, I know all these names, but which ones do I really care about? Which ones am I most interested in? Now, probably no spoiler alert to say that one of the things that you're going to be hearing over and over from me is this game has a really good production and a really great theme, or this game has a really bad production, really bad theme, and that's going to heavily influence my choices here. But, like I said, no surprise. That's kind of what I like. The other thing is, just in terms of the order of games, I just decided to go from the bottom of the list up to the top. So in other words, my first game in the ones I want to play, I'm going to start at the lowest on the top 100 for what it's worth. So coming in at number 100 on the BGG top 100 list and number 5 on my list is Rising Sun by Eric Lang. This is a game that has been on my radar for a long time, and somehow I just haven't gotten a chance to play it. I'm not sure why, but I just haven't. But Blood Rage is possibly my number 1 game of all time, and it is certainly in my top 5. I love that game. I've never gotten bored of it. We play it still frequently, and I think it's one of the games that we as a group enjoy the most. There's so many great things about Blood Rage and Eric Lang games in general that appeal to me. The area control, the familiar feel with the clever types of combat mechanisms, the really big CMON production, all of that stuff just gives me a huge thrill. And so Rising Sun looks like it's going to check all those boxes for me. Honestly, at this point, the only reason I haven't gotten a copy of Rising Sun is because it takes at least 3 players, which is a tough thing for me because a lot of times I'm playing with 2 players. And so I don't know that I would get that much play out of it. But it's one that I'd still love to get together with you guys and play at some point in the future.
What a great pick, Chris. That almost made my list here. I absolutely love Eric Lang games. What's the one that just came out? Ankh. I had so much fun playing that. Yeah, and Blood Rage is a blast too. So that's also on my radar. But it did make my list here. What did make my list is number 86. And some of these, I was like, I think I want to play them. Yeah, I'll try them out. That sounds pretty fun. So number 86 currently on the top 100 is Kanban EV. That's a game by Vital Lacerda, Eagle Griffin Games, and that one was published in 2020. Vital Lacerda games are notoriously heavy, hard to learn. There's all these rules, nuances, and they're terribly complex. Sometimes people say for complexity's sake. But this one is supposed to be a little bit more sensical. It's supposed to flow. It's going to have rules that kind of click, allegedly. And I heard it has a nice gameplay. So I might reluctantly want to try. This doesn't even sound like I want to play it. I do want to try Kanban EV to see if it breaks that Vital Lacerda mold and is a fun game.
It sounds like Adam had such a hard time finding just 5 games on the top 100 that he actually wanted to play.
It was pretty rough for me. I was like, I don't know how to play that one.
That's funny. Yeah, so when I looked at this list, and I had about, like I said, 32 games or so that I hadn't played, so I just kind of started to split them first and to say, like, I want to play or I don't want to play it. And I ended up about even. I had like 15 to 16 in both groupings. But as I was looking at the grouping of games I do want to play, and these are all games that I actually am interested in playing, like half of them were very dry mid 2010 era Euros, which, I'm the Euro guy. So you would expect my list to be full of the Euros on here that I haven't played yet. But to be honest, most of them don't get me too excited because they've got that still like dry color palette and theming. And I'm sure mechanically they're great. I'm excited to explore them at some point, but none of them made my top 5 list. None of the really dry ones did. One thing to note is that we didn't talk about our list beforehand, so we're going to have some crossover here, and I'm going to kick us right off with some crossover. My number 5 is number 99 on the list, which is Rising Sun by Eric Lang. I've really enjoyed most of my gameplays of Eric Lang games, and of his Dudes on a Map trilogy, the Blood Rage and Ankh, both fantastic games. Blood Rage, one of my top games of all time. Ankh might get there if I had more plays of it. Really, really love these games. The production, the thematics, the streamlined, cool gameplay. So I really want to experience Rising Sun. When I said I loved Wonderland's War, I had some people say, hey, Rising Sun also has like a 2-phase system where first phase you're setting yourself up for battle and next one you're doing the battle. And yeah, I want to check it out. The production looks cool. So Chris, I'm right here with you. We got to get this one played. Hopefully we'll be talking about this one on the show pretty soon because I think this one could be a really fun hit for us.
And here's an interesting note about how quickly things can change. That was number 100 when I looked. I think I did my list 2 days ago. And Rising Sun was number 100 on the list. Now it's apparently moved up to 99. So I guess Eric Lang has recruited a few more fans. Or maybe Adam and Tim and I voted a couple times ourselves. I don't know. So I guess I have to say, with the caveat that as I give the number rankings in the top 100, some of them might be a little bit out of date. So already there's one. Ranked number 4 on my list and number 81 on the BGG list. And this is one Tim might be surprised by. It's Grand Austria Hotel, which is designed by Virginio Gili and Simone Luciani. Now, I said before that one of the first things I look at is theme and production. And here I'm going to break my rule right off the bat by saying this is a game that looks horrendous. I have zero interest in the theme of this game. The production looks just like a big, ugly bunch of nothing. But the design team here catches my attention. This is part of this group of, I don't even know what the Rat Pack of Italian game designers. I don't know if they have a nickname or anything, but you see their names over and over again in different combinations. Simone Luciani, I think, is the one that I've seen the most in games that I've been interested in. But games like Solkin, Gollum, which we just did recently, have always caught my attention. They have interesting things happening. They have really unique production and theme and incorporated into really fun Euro-style games. Now, I don't know if Grand Austria Hotel is going to live up to that expectation, but I have heard great things about it, and with a pedigree like that, it's definitely one that had to make my list, and I want to give it a try.
Chris, this does really surprise me coming from you, but I do know that you've been enjoying some of those Italian-designed Euros lately, and this was one of those Euros I was just talking about. So I'll spoil that this did not make my list, but I've heard nothing but good things about Grand Austria Hotel, so I would love to play this with you sometime. We'll have to give it a shot.
There is one thing that I wanted to mention about mechanisms too that caught my attention with this. Similar to La Granja, there is a roll the dice and then select your action base on the dice rolls. And I had so much fun with that in La Granja that seeing it here kind of caught my attention as well. So if the design team wasn't enough, that mechanism I think is a lot of fun, and I'd like to give that a try too.
Chris is another one that's been on my radar. Grand Austria Hotel didn't make my list, but I also would love to try this game. My fourth most desired game that I would have played from the Board Game Geek Top 100 is The Crew, Quest for Planet 9. Is currently at number 47. That's a 2019 game. I know, Tim, you've at least played this one. I'm not sure if Chris has played this one. It's designed by Thomas Singh, published by Cosmos. And this is a cooperative trick taker. It sounds like it has some group dynamics and social interaction is going to be there. You're trying to work together to meet these different objectives. I guess each round there's something different you're trying to do, and you have to try to play this card last or take this card without doing this and do this. And so certain things you have to try to work as a group to do. The game could be over in like 10 minutes. If you bust it, then you just reshuffle and try again, and you make fun of the guy that messed that all up. Sounds like a great time. Tim, what are your thoughts here on The Crew, Quest for Planet 9?
The Crew is great, Adam, and I think you're going to love this game. And I think if you're playing with a group of people that like trick-taking and have, at least a minimal experience with it, this is going to be a blast. It starts out pretty simple. The objectives are pretty easy, but you run through that hand in, 2 minutes, and then you're on to the next one. But it gets increasingly more challenging and interesting and exciting. And when you see somebody just like blew that trick, but you can't say anything to them, you're not allowed to speak to them. There's one mechanism that allows you to communicate with the other players by like hinting that you've either got the highest card in a suit, or you've only got one card left in a suit, or the lowest card in a suit. So you've got one way to communicate, and then trying to find the right time to do that so that your opponents don't blow the objective. It's a blast. We actually rented yurts with some friends down in where you used to live, Adam, Temecula area, right?
In Temecula, that's where I grew up.
Yeah, so we rented yurts from somebody down there just as a different experience. But it was yurts on somebody's property at the house they owned, but they had a pool that you could share. So we slept in the yurts at night, and then we'd go and like hang out by the pool most of the day. And so I busted out The Crew, and we played The Crew for like 6 hours straight, just like repeatedly. And if we missed on a mission, we replayed it, and it was just so much fun. I could have played it all day long. So I have this in my collection, but I think I'm probably going to move it on just because I've restarted the set of objectives with like 4 different groups, and it's always been a fun time, but I don't have a group that's like, yeah, let's just keep playing until we get to the end. So, I think I've gotten what I wanted to play out of it, but I would happily play this anytime. I kind of want to dig into The Crew Deep Sea missions, which is the follow-on to it. It sounds like it switches things up just a little bit, but still keeps it similar gameplay. So anyway, great pick, Adam. I think you'd really, really dig this game. Did we lose Adam? I'll keep going for now, and hopefully he'll jump back in here. So my number 4 is a crossover again. So this was Adam's number 5. This is number 86 on the list, and this is Kanban EV. Now, this is a Euro, but it's not as dry. It's a little bit more of a modern theme, and just it's one of these Vital Lacerda games with Ian O'Toole's artwork and production that just hits on all cylinders. And I've only played one Lacerda game on Mars. I didn't particularly enjoy it, so I don't know that this is going to be a better hit for me, but I'm dying to try another one. And this is the one that I am most interested in. It just seems like such an interesting set of mechanisms. And the idea is that you're basically running an automobile factory and trying to, be the most successful manager in this spot. But then when you look at the production of all these like little screen printed automobiles that you're producing and this beautiful busy board that's going on, it's got me intrigued at least. So I definitely like to try Kanban EV, and that was my number 4 game that I'd like to play.
So I've noticed a thing here, Tim, with car games.
Did you say Kanban EV, Tim?
He did.
I did, yeah.
I heard that the whole time. I can't believe I didn't react until right now. That's crazy.
So coming in at number 3 on my list and number 34 on the BGG Top 100 is Food Chain Magnate, designed by Jeroen Duman and Horace Wershinga. And I'm sure I mispronounced those names, so apologies to the designers. This is actually a game that I've seen a few times at my local game store. and it just caught my attention and looked neat. And it wasn't until going through this list for today's episode that I actually realized this game was in the top 100. So now I'm going to go back to my whole theme and production thing. And this is the coolest looking game. It's very 1950s art in the most adorable, enchanting way, a lot like Welcome to. It has that look about it. It has a great looking sense of humor. And one of the things that I think looked most appealing about this in terms of the mechanisms is, and I don't know, maybe I think I'm right about this, I'm not 100% sure, but it looks a little bit like Smartphone Inc. in that you're trying to build a business model and use that business model to be the most successful in your business, which in this case is running a fast food chain in the 1950s. And that seemed pretty appealing to me, partly because I really liked Smartphone Inc., and partly because this looked like that, but with a more entertaining theme, because you can't really get a less entertaining theme than smartphones. So I think this one may kick that up a notch. I don't know how similar it is, but it sure looked a little bit like it to me.
Chris, I have tried this game. It's a splatter game, which are notoriously heavy rules, but are supposed to have all this kind of interaction. And I can't believe you even considered this one after looking at this map, which is just like a square of squares and like some roads, and you rotate these things. It's just putrid. Like, I don't know how you, Chris, I thought you just wanted all the miniatures and the paint and the color and the cool art. What happened? This is like a battle of the diners. I don't know. I tried this one. I could not get into it. I've heard so many good things about it. I should give it a couple more shots. It's available online if you guys ever want to try this and have me sit there and not understand the rules. Tim, what are you going to say about Food Chain Magnate here?
Just that I think Chris's instinct is probably right from what I know about it, that it's probably a similar type of, economic production simulation like Smartphone Inc. is, although I suspect that it's quite a bit heavier and longer than Smartphone Inc. But it is it's a simulation similar to Smartphone Inc. Chris, I think you're right about that.
Yeah, and Adam, I can't disagree with you about a lot of the production on this. A lot of it is pretty bad looking. The board is pretty bad looking, which ironically is the exact opposite of Smartphone Inc., where the board was a real highlight. But the art in this just really makes me smile.
It does have that Bob's Big Boy look to it. It is like Battle of the Diners. So I could see you getting into that kind of that side of the theme for sure. I am going to go with a game from 2019. It's 38th overall. This is Barrage. And this is one of those designers you were mentioning, Chris. This is Simone Luciani wearing his tremendous volume of water over a dam. Him and Tommaso Battista designed this game, and it's published by Cranio. I tried to get the group to play one time. Tim chickened out. It was going to be too mean, even though Tim was super mean to me tonight in Arcs on our replay. This game, you're trying to control the flow of water, make some electricity. There's a lot of interaction going on here, and then you can block people. You can interrupt the flow of water. You can divert the flow and starve somebody of water so they can't make any electricity. I've had my eye on this one for a while. It has this neat kind of mechanic where there's a little, you put your resources and they kind of go away and they go around this little, water wheel thing, and then they rotate back and you get to use them again. So there's some forward planning and it looks really neat to me. That's Barrage 2019, 38th on Board Game Geek's Top 100.
Yeah, we literally almost just played this like 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I went and watched a how to play video. Did you guys ever get around to doing that? Did you watch a rules video? Or
didn't make it that far.
No, you talked us out of it.
Yeah.
It looked like the most uninspired worker placement game I've ever seen. This could be a great game, and I almost put it on my don't want to play list because after watching the rules video and teach, I was like, that just doesn't look fun to me at all. But I've heard great things about it, so I will be happy to play this with you guys when you're really ready to dig into it. I'll bite down and just go into it, and maybe it's really fun. But what I got the sense of is the mechanisms were very bland worker placement combined with somebody can just be cut off from a resource the rest of the game and basically be out, and that's boring and frustrating. And so nothing about it seems like it's actually gonna be fun to play. It might be clever, maybe it's great, I don't know, but I'll just say that hopefully we'll try it at some point and we can really give our opinions on it. It would have made my list here, except there are too many other games I didn't want to play. as well. So so it didn't.
Wait a minute, which list? The never want to play list or the I do want to play list?
The never want to play. Yeah, the don't want to play.
Okay.
Yeah, it used to be on my want to play list. Like literally, it almost made my top 5 games that I want to play this year when we talked back in December. But I didn't really, I didn't watch how to play it. Or I didn't like read the rules. I just kind of had a sense for what the game was. But after actually watching how to play, where it's just quite literally like there's a bunch of worker placement spots. You take a worker placement spot and you build a component. You take a worker placement spot and you move water down the thing. And it just seemed like the most boring, typical worker placement actions I've ever seen. Otherwise, I would have been a lot more interested, I think. So, yeah, let's play it at some point. But definitely not excited on my side.
Damn, Tim. Damn.
Adam, you and I almost had some overlap here on the playlist because I actually had this one on my playlist originally before we even talked about this episode. And honestly, Tim, I mean, not that I usually take my game cues from Tim all the time because he and I don't have similar tastes, but he talked me out of this one. And I would still like to play it, but, I think if you're going to go to somebody and say, hey, worker placement, Tim's the guy who knows what's what. So I did not put it on my list. Maybe I should have. I don't know.
This has to be the first time you've ever listened to Tim, Chris. I don't understand what's happening.
Cats and dogs living together.
Right.
So my number 3 game that I want to play on the BGG Top 100 is at number 74 on the list. And this is Robinson Crusoe Adventures on the Cursed Island, designed by Joanna Kajanka and Ignacy Trzewiczek from Portal Games. Now, I've played one of Ignacy Trzewiczek's games that I really, really loved. It's probably sitting somewhere in my top 30 games of all time, top 50 at least, and that was, I can't remember the name of it, Settlers. Anyway, it's a little civilization card drafting game. But this game is very different. The reason I'm excited about it is that it feels like it's going to be a very thematic Euro type of experience, but it's made to be a solo or co-op experience. So obviously I'm not playing a co-op. So this is a potential solo game I want to play at some point. And the idea is you're Robinson Crusoe, you've landed on this island on your own, and you've got to survive. And it sounds frustrating and it sounds like everything is going to go wrong, and the first round of the game you might be just trying to build a fire so you don't starve that night. Like it's that type of tough, mean game, but set with Euro trappings on it. And I'm just so intrigued by it. I think some people really love this game, some people really hate it because of the style of game it is, but I definitely want to give it a try. I'm intrigued by it. It'll be interesting to see how this hits for me when I finally get a chance to play it. But have you guys heard about Robinson Crusoe? Or any interest in it?
I have not heard of it. I'm looking at it right now. And I mean, just the fact that it's co-op kind of turns me off a little bit, but it looks like it could be fun.
More on Robinson Crusoe in the second half of the show.
Okay.
Well, I guess we know how Adam feels about this game. All right. Coming in at number 2 on my list and number 25 on the BGG Top 100 is Arkham Horror, the card game. This is one that I just heard so many good things about. A lot of our friends on Twitter have talked about this game so much, and the theme, of course, is great for me. I'm one of those people who believe you can never have too many Cthulhu games. Maybe that day will come, and I'm sure that day will come, but I haven't gotten there yet. I love Cthulhu games. The art looks really cool on this one. I've never played a living card game before, and this is one, and it sounds like it'd be a lot of fun. The one downside of this game is the fact that it's co-op. So again, I'm breaking one of my rules. I generally am not going to gravitate toward the co-op games, but I tried to be pretty diverse in this list in terms of the gameplay and the style, and I think this is, I gave myself room for one co-op game, and this is the one. Because I've heard so many good things.
Just remember, Chris, when a game says it's co-op, that means it's solo.
And well, yeah, that's generally true. I don't know that this one does, though. I think this might be a multiplayer.
No, you can play it solo.
Okay.
You can play it solo.
Number 2 game that I am interested in playing on the top 100 is War of the Ring 2nd Edition. This is a 2011. It's sitting at number 10 right now on Board Game Geek's top 100. It's the number 1 war game and the number 5 thematic game, if those rankings mean anything to you, which I don't know why I brought those up. They don't really mean much to me. Anyway, the theme here is War of the Ring, the Lord of the Rings. So, those awesome movies that came out back in 2002. How crazy is that? 20 years old. You got a giant map, and it's just a 2-player game, and, well, it says 4, but not really. It's actually 2. And you're just going at it. Either you're the good guys and try to throw the ring in the volcano, or you're the bad guys and try to make sure that doesn't happen. And if you love the books, if you love the movies, you get to act all that stuff out and do it in this whole kind of crazy way over an afternoon, over some sandwiches and snacks and maybe some beers, and talk it out. This sounds like a perfect game for my dad and I to get into. It's long, it's complex, there's all these little weird nuances, but it sounds like it plays out differently every single time. It just seems cool to me. I really like this theme. I enjoy the setting. It's the ultimate kind of fantasy thing that all these other fantasy things were based on. That's why I like to give War of the Ring a try.
Yeah, I'm not surprised it's on your list, Adam, because I hear this compared a lot to Star Wars Rebellion. It's a pretty similar experience, 2-player asymmetric sides.
Yep.
If you're on the side of like Frodo and the Hobbits, you've got kind of this hidden movement game where you're trying to move and get the ring to Mordor without the evil guys discovering you. And then if you're the evil guys, then you've got the massive forces and you're chasing people down, but there's card play involved. So I think it's going to be very similar to Star Wars Rebellion. I would love to try this at some point, just like I loved trying Star Wars Rebellion. I don't expect this is a game that I'd want to go back to many times, but I think it's a game that's worth probably one time, a couple times maybe, sitting down and just going through this adventure, playing out the books and the stories. This is a good pick.
Thank you.
All right, so my number 2 on my list is a game called Mechs versus Minions. And this was designed by a whole bunch of people from the publisher Riot Games. So Riot Games is a video game publisher that creates a very popular video game series called League of Legends. League of Legends is a game where you have a couple people that work together as a team to go fight another couple people as a team. And it's this big tournament level type of video game everybody plays. But Riot Games decided to come out with a board game back in 2016 that's based in that world, but isn't really that type of game. This is a co-op game as well, and sounds like you can play it. Yeah, I don't even think you can play this solo. I think this is co-op only, so this is kind of surprising that this made my list. But I've been intrigued by it really since I got into gaming. It has a beautiful production, tons and tons of great little miniatures, but the gameplay just seems fun. It's a programming game, it sounds like, where you're basically kind of setting up the actions that are going to happen. And you're playing cooperatively against this just mass of little goblins or something like that. But there's basically, you're going to be swarmed. So you're kind of trying to program up your actions, and you can level up and kind of build up how strong these actions get. And it just sounds fun. It's played over a campaign. So it's like, it's not a repeat game. It's like you're playing over like 10 or 15 games, and each scenario is a little bit different. The production just has me charmed. The idea of it has me charmed. It's probably not a game I love. I'll probably never buy this game, and there's a good chance I'll never get a chance to play it. But I've always been intrigued by it.
And this is a game I've had my eye on occasionally, Tim. Programming aspect sounds neat. At the time of its release, I heard it was one of the best buys for all the plastic and chunky stuff you got in there. I think there's, as you're going through the campaign or whatever it is, you get to open these different boxes. There's a secret box in there. It's like 1 foot high and by 6 inches. So there's some giant boom, whatever thing you have to try to defeat at the end. And like I said, it's fluctuate. I've had my eye on it I was close to buying it at one point. I never pulled the trigger, but Mechs vs. Minions, I'd love to try this one. It sounds pretty cool.
All right, well, before I jump into my number 1 pick, I have to go back for a second. I neglected before to say for my number 2 pick, Arkham Horror, the card game, it was designed by Nate French and MJ Newman. So now back to the regularly scheduled programming. And my number 1 pick at number 14 on the BGG all-time list is Twilight Struggle. This is another one of those ones where I'm going to violate my own rule a little bit. This is a game that looks incredibly cool from a theme perspective, at least to me, but the production does not look that exciting. It seems a little bit unfortunate. But I think it makes up for it in terms of the theme, in that I find the Cold War an incredibly interesting period. And it's when I grew up. I grew up in the Cold War period, at least the end of it. And it goes back to that nostalgia thing. There's a nostalgic feel to this game that makes me want to give it a shot. You guys had actually told me about it a while back too, and suggested that I might really like it. So I think that also affected my opinion of it. And of course, it's got area control, which I love, and in an interesting version of area control. So you put all that together, and the fact that it's number 14 on the all-time list, I mean, it's got some, it's got some legs, especially considering that it came out in 2005. So it's even earlier than I think the earliest time period on the list that you gave us before, Tim. So this one's managed to stick it out for a long time, and I'd love to give it a shot. Oh, and the designers were Ananda Gupta and Jason Matthews.
Chris, this is one I've tried. There's a beautiful app for this one. I highly recommend getting that if you're interested. You could play a billion times against the AI, or you could play against me. We could both struggle at this game trying to learn how to do it without killing ourselves. That's one thing you can do in this game. You can accidentally kill yourself, and that's, I think, what I kept doing like the first 5 times. So I was like, I don't want to play this anymore. I keep dying. This game's too hard. But yeah, it's supposed to be a great game. I heard the way to do it is to learn it with somebody of equal skill. Otherwise, they'll just get frustrated and they'll play these tricky cards. This is one similar to Expanse, where you have the operational points, or you can do the event on the card. And then for this one, you can play a card, and it's actually like, if you're the Americans, you can play the Soviet card, and they get to do the event, but you might get to do that. So it's all about mitigation and this balance back and forth, and it helps to know the cards. There's a lot of interesting things going on here, and I think you would like it very much.
I played this game once, and I'm glad I played it. It was a pretty interesting experience. I was pretty frustrated by the end of it. I would be happy to try it again, but I'm not going to hunt it out. So I think it's worth a play, Chris. I think definitely there's some pretty cool things going on in this game, and historically it's very relevant. Like you're going to get a lot of historical notes that you will probably even remember from your childhood, or at least you've read about or learned about. So I think it's worth a play for sure.
My number one game I like to play from the top 100 is Twilight Imperium 4th edition. This one's 6th overall, and it is designed by Dane Beltrami, Corey Konitska, and Christian T. Peterson. So like Fantasy Flight Games. This is one of the all-time classics of board games. It's a 4X. It's mentioned up there with Eclipse, but instead of the more resource management aspects like in Eclipse, this one has a lot of negotiation and kind of civilization development, and there's like a vote and there's politicking in this. So this is another huge afternoon event game. It says it's played best with 6 players, so you're gonna be sitting around, you're gonna need some food, you're gonna need a venue, you're gonna need willing participants that are gonna dedicate a significant portion of their lives to learning and playing this game, which I'd like to do at some point. I don't know how many times I'd go back to this. It'd be fun to learn it and have a group that would play it once every 6 months, once a year, or something like that. I don't know if it'll ever happen for me because of all the upfront learning and organization and stuff that's involved, but this is a game that I've always wanted to try at least once. That's Twilight Imperium 4th edition.
Leave me out of this one. I don't have any interest in playing this.
I have a little bit to say about that, but not yet.
Okay. So my number one game that I am excited to play on the Board Game Geek top 100 list, and it's the highest on the list for me, number 25, and Chris already mentioned this, is Arkham Horror, the card game. I also have never played any of the living card game systems. Marvel Champions is, I think, the most recent and popular one, but they've also had a Lord of the Rings one. But I was a long-time Magic the Gathering player, and so I am very familiar with the idea of crafting a deck and trying to assemble something for the right mechanism. And I think the living card game system has the potential to be really fun. And the reason why I like the idea of Arkham Horror the most of all those groups is that it seems like it really leads to a story kind of scenario each time you're playing it out. Now, the challenge with these living card games, of course, is that you can buy a starter pack and maybe you get to play a couple games, 2 or 3 scenarios with it, but then you're out of content, and so then you have to go buy another pack with new scenarios. So it's not something I'm probably going to get too deep into, and don't plan to anyway, but they just came out with a revised, or like a second edition of Arkham Horror, the card game, which is supposed to include everything you need, kind of the best way to play the first few scenarios of the game, I think. And so I'm planning to pick that up next time I see it at a local game store and just try it out. I think it's going to be a fun solo experience. Maybe I'll only get a few games into it, but who knows? Maybe it'll get its hooks into me and I'll pick up another scenario here or there when I feel like playing it. This game looks really fun. Again, the Cthulhu theme isn't quite as exciting for me as it is for you, Chris, but I do think that there's a lot of interesting things in this game where you're playing these investigators and trying to uncover a mystery, and there's these creepy things happening. It just feels like a great way to play out that Arkham horror game theme. So I'm really excited to try this one, and this is probably at one of the top of my list of games I plan to pick up and actually give a shot to pretty soon.
What is the difference between Arkham Horror and there's Eldritch Horror too? Is that correct?
Yeah, so there's 2 board games that kind of fall within this series that are more of like move around a map and explore and uncover things. And this is just a card game. So that's probably the biggest difference. I think it's supposed to be a similar kind of theme, but the Arkham Horror, the card game, is literally just like you have a hand of cards and then you flip over cards from the bad guy deck or whatever, the event deck, and then you have to respond to them with dice checks. It's a little different than like Eldritch Horror, which is a big map of a city, and then you're moving around and events happen and you have to explore it. So little different. Mansions of Madness is the other one that's kind of in that same series, but Mansions of Madness I think is a little bit more set inside. Eldritch Horror is a little bit more of like citywide type of thing. Similar ideas.
Yeah, these games all just have that great vibe of you can take out that great old one with a Tommy gun or a good left hook,
All right, so those were the top 5 games that we want to play on the Board Game Geek Top 100. So, there's a good chance that you'll hear us talk about these in the future as we actually get a chance to experience them and explore them and hopefully even play them together in some cases. On the other hand, there's also some games that we don't want to play, and some of them may even be on the list of our co-hosts here. So maybe some of these games we will never play together. But let's jump into our top 5 games that we don't want to play on the Board Game Geek Top 100.
Well, hey, let's start by making Tim's prediction come true. My number 5 on the do not want to play list is any of the crew games. Because, uninteresting production and art, check. Co-op, check. Trick-taking game, check. You can't talk to anybody to complain about it. Check. There is nothing for me to like here. Period.
Chris, did you like playing the Mind?
No. I think I'm the only person who does not like playing the Mind.
Okay.
My wife loves it. It's one of these things that, when we're around family or people who don't play board games and the subject comes up that I play board games like this, she goes, well, there's this one you guys will love and it's called The Mind. And I play along because I appreciate that she brings it up and a lot of people have fun with it. I hate The Mind.
Okay. I thought you liked it, so then in that case, that I would absolutely say, yeah, this is not the game for you. Don't ever try it.
And now I can't let her listen to this episode because she can't know that's true.
Yeah, The Mind was fun, kind of a novelty. But moving on, my least want to play from the top 100 is Robinson Crusoe, Tim. This sounds a bit like, what was it? Outlive, where you're just gonna go and you're gonna die. You're gonna try some stuff over here and you're gonna be dead. You're gonna break a leg. You're gonna not have enough water. You're gonna get dysentery and die from exposure. It sounds absolutely miserable to me. I heard the rule book was just a total mess and just a shoddy mess of a game. Keep this thing away from me. Robinson Crusoe, I know a lot of people have fun with it. I know I want to spend an afternoon, 12 hours playing some board game with 6 strangers. That sounds better to me than dying on my own for 6 hours and not really know if I understood the rules correctly. Robinson Crusoe, number 74.
Yeah, and I have to admit, Adam, that I expect that my experience with it will probably fall where you're thinking it's going to, which is I probably will not enjoy it and will probably never pull it out again. But I'm just still intrigued by it, so
okay.
I want to try it, even though I don't have super high expectations. It's gonna. All right. So my number 5 game on the list of games that I don't want to play is number 82 on Board Game Geek right now, and that is Tainted Grail: The Fall of Avalon. Now, this is a game that Adam owned and sold to Chris, and Chris has had a chance to play, but everything I know about this game it sounds awful to me. Like big overproduced minis that don't have any need in the game. Sounds to me like very little agency, like a lot of moving around and just doing what the cards say. It doesn't sound fun at all to me. It sounds like a fiddly rule set, rule book that's hard to parse, and it doesn't sound fun to me at all. Chris, you've played this though. I know you like it.
Tim is so So wrong about this
Chris,
game.
do you think that
So
I would
wrong.
like this game? Though you know games that I like and that I don't like. Do you think that I would like Tainted Grail: The Fall of Avalon?
I think you'd throw yourself out a window.
Okay.
I think it's great. Well, my number 4 on my do not want to play list and number 52 on the BGG all-time list is Clans of Caledonia. There are so many games that could fall into this category, and this is just the first one that came to mind. Trade and commerce in pre-industrial Europe, or hey, here's a little bit of wacky switching it up here, industrializing Europe. They changed it up a little bit. It's not just sheep here. So there's absolutely nothing about this game that catches my eye. The theme just looks boring. The concept is so overdone. I'm so tired of that. And I know a lot of it is because some of the games are old. This one is not particularly old. But there's a million games out there. I would never see this and say, oh yes, that's the one I gotta play. Nothing catches my eye.
Let me explain to you, Chris, why we should play this anyway. So Clans of Caledonia was on my top 5 games. In fact, it was my number 1 game that I wanted to play when we met back in December and had this conversation. And I left it off my list today because I didn't want to repeat it. So this would have made my list if I hadn't already talked about it in the past. But the reason that you would be interested in playing this game, Chris, is that this is a slight evolution of Gaia Project. This is basically the Gaia Project system with a little bit of an economic kind of market system added to it. And otherwise, from what I understand, it's pretty close to Gaia Project. So that's why I'm excited to explore it, because I love Gaia Project so much. This came out after Gaia Project and was heavily influenced by it, it sounds like. And but I get it. Like, the theme is definitely the biggest thing that's not gotten me to get it to the table. Like, if this was Gaia Project and had a space theme, a sci-fi theme, I would have probably already been played at this point, but I just can't get myself too excited for it. So I totally get it.
Yeah, frustrating the designers and publishers that just decide to throw on these themes. Why? Make something cool. There's a lot of stuff out there besides sheep and industrializing. Anyway,
Yeah.
enough said about that. My number 4 game that I do not want to play from the top 100 is at number 60, and this is The Seventh Continent. Ludovic Rudy and Bruno Sauter, and this is published by Sirius Pope. This was a big old Kickstarter back in the day, of a giant box of essentially cards similar to Tainted Grail. You're kind of exploring this land, the situation, and you can go and you can die and then reset back to this card and try it all again if you want to do that. Playing time here is 5 to 1,000 minutes. So that sounds awful. A lot of people love this game, have a lot of fun with it. It does have a narrative to it, and you're going through, you're discovering this thing and that thing. But I don't want to spend so much time, mostly by myself, just flipping through cards, seeing what they say, marching over here. Oh, I failed. Now I have to die and restart at this checkpoint. At one point, I was very interested, but my tastes have kind of moved on. It's a big box of stuff that I no longer am interested in. That is The Seventh Continent.
Adam, I'm glad you mentioned this one because it didn't make my list, but the funny thing is that this was the hardest game for me to decide whether I wanted to play it or I didn't want to play it. Because the production looks really, pleasant. It's got this great little cute artwork. And the whole concept is it's just a big box of cards. And so you start on a space and then you say, hey, I want to explore to the right. And so you take a card out of the box and then you flip it over and then it's a new space to explore. That's kind of how this map grows. And so that's got me charmed and intrigued. But my understanding is that this is a game that you can't win the first time you sit down to play it. The only way that you can actually make progress in it is that, hey, this time I walked this direction. Oh, and I fell off a cliff. So now I got to reset the game up. And I know never to walk that direction. So instead I'll walk this direction. Oh, I found some food. So now in the future, when I have to reset it and play again, I know to go over there for food before I move on to something else. And so it kind of follows some of that old video game model where you would have to kind of make your way through, oh yeah, I died 5 times in the first level. Now I know how to get through it. So now I can get to the second level type of thing. So I don't think I'm going to enjoy that at all, which is why I probably shouldn't ever play it. But I'm still very just intrigued by this card system and the idea that you could just explore this open world and uncover and discover all this stuff. And I don't know. Yeah, that was a hard one. I'm glad you mentioned it, Adam.
But Tim, I'm curious, why is it that system charms you in Seventh Continent, but it turns you off so much in Tainted Grail? Same thing.
better production, more interesting production. It's a little bit.
Wait, which one is a better production?
I like Seventh Continent's. I like the look and feel of Seventh Continent better. Like, listen, I don't like that realistic, dark fantasy artwork. It's fine. It works in some situations, but it doesn't get me. It doesn't want me to explore that world. Seventh Continent's got this cute kind of cartoony world that you're exploring, and it just looks more fun. It looks like a place I'd rather spend my time than in Tainted Grail. So I think that's really the biggest difference between the two. But yeah, again, realistically, Adam, I probably will hate Seventh Continent if I try to play it. I just have always wanted to at least try it at some point.
Fair enough.
My number 4 on the list of games I don't want to play is Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition. And we kind of were talking about some Cthulhu-themed games. But the main reason I don't want to play this, and I could be completely off base here. Now, first of all, it's got a play time of 120 to 180 minutes. So it's minimum of 2 to 3 hours. I've heard it can go a lot longer than that. And my understanding of this game is that it's just a level up from... What's a House on Haunted Hill? Is that what it's called?
Betrayal at the House on the Hill.
Betrayal at House on the Hill. Yeah, and so Betrayal at House on the Hill is one of my least favorite gaming experiences ever. Like, I hate that game so much. I mean, you literally spend the first third of the game with no choices. Y'all move right, left, or forward, and then whatever is there happens. So there's really no game there. There's no decisions. It's just an activity to do. And then you get to the haunt, and it just gets over convoluted and frustrating. Now, I don't think I don't think Mansions of Madness deals with that same issue of the haunt and how that happens, because it's an app driven game. Basically, you're moving into another room, so you click a button and it tells you what to lay out and what's going to show up there and stuff like that. So you still have that kind of exploration that is kind of more of an activity than a game, but it sounds like it's drawn out. It's got some story to it. I think I like it a little bit more than Betrayal on the House on the Hill, but I think it's going to be close enough to the experience that I just don't want to do it, and I don't want to do it for that long. I could be totally wrong about this. I mean, when I explain all of this, it sounds an awful lot like Nemesis. It does have like some hidden traitor elements where you have different roles and your opponents don't know your roles. So who knows, maybe it could be a really fun thematic experience, but I never thought I wanted to play Nemesis either. And I was wrong about that. I ended up enjoying it. So this could be one where someone says, please sit down and play this with me. And I try it and I really enjoy it. I don't think so though. I don't think this is a game for me.
All right. Well, coming in at number 3 on my list of games I do not want to play, and at number 20 on the BGG all-time list, is a game that you guys reviewed in episode number 35, Concordia. And I'm only picking Concordia because it is one of that mass of games that I've already pointed at with Clans of Caledonia that is just emblematic of all the things that I find tired about Euroboard gaming. Trade and commerce in pre-industrial Europe. Again. I mean, for God's sake, the box of this game is like a picture of a lady reaching into her purse and handing a coin to an old man to like buy a piece of cloth. What about that makes me say this is something I want to spend my time on? And so I throw that question out into the void. Nobody needs to answer it, but the answer is nothing.
Yeah, this is one we tried. It's supposed to be one of the classics of board games, so I was happy to try it. But yeah, I don't think I'll go back to it, Chris. You nailed it. The theme, again, maybe I'm superficial, but unless the gameplay is just absolutely stellar and mind-blowing, I'm not going to go back to it because I can get stellar gameplay from a theme I enjoy.
I have to be honest. I mean, I'm being a little bit hyperbolic here because I'm trying to make a point. I mean, I understand that some games that can be boring in their theme have incredible gameplay. So this one, not only to have the boring theme, but as I recall, you guys said the gameplay wasn't that awesome either.
No, that's actually the one thing I want to call out here, Chris, is that we loved this game. Like, you go back and listen to that review, and we raved about it. We had a fun time playing it. We raved about the mechanisms, but we all said we didn't want to go back and play it again. And it's I think almost 100% in this case based on the theme, that it is just so dry and so dull that it's just not the full package. But I do think it's a really fun game. Adam, do you remember differently? Because I think we all had a really fun time playing it.
I don't know, maybe in the moment, yeah, but then when I think about going back to it, I'm just like, nah.
Yeah, right. It doesn't seem fun. And I agree. I don't have any interest in playing this game again. I think it's one of those games that's great mechanically, and if somebody would just freshen it up, put a new theme on it, you'd probably have an amazing game that feel like it was invented today or created today. But Chris, I don't blame you. I wouldn't try to talk you into it. It's cool game to play once, but there's so many better games out there.
My number 3 least desirable game I want to play is Kingdom Death Monster. This game is from 2015. It's currently sitting at number 55 on the Board Game Geek Top 100 list. This is a game that's sheer decadence. It's more about the miniatures, or it's at least a lot about the miniatures. And there's just a lot of stuff. There was a series of Kickstarters with this game. People invested thousands of dollars getting all the components and miniatures and artwork that came along with this game. It's very macabre, very dark theme, and it looks like you're playing on this mat. And I've seen reviews of it. I've seen a little bit of the gameplay. I was intrigued at one point about how it worked and what is going on here, but now I just have no desire. It sounds like there's so much administration going on here, and take these notes and track this thing and do this thing. Oh, and finally you're able to punch this guy and take him out. I don't know if it's like a skirmishy kind of thing. You're just on basically a grid, moving around, sending hits, collecting hits, upgrading your guy. Not the game for me. Kingdom Death Monster.
Yeah, this game falls into that same realm of like Tainted Grail, Seventh Continent, where the idea is that you're going out there and you're struggling to do anything to start with. And then if you get lucky, maybe you finally take out the first monster. So yeah, in fact, I can tell you how this first scenario goes, right? You're like 4 people who have nothing. It's 4 miniatures of people that are barely wearing loincloths. They literally have nothing to their name. They don't have tools. They don't have anything at all. And the first monster you have to fight is this big white lion. And so I've read about the scenario that you play through where you go up there and it's, I don't know, some kind of card-based or card and dice-based combat system. And then you'll fight this thing, but most likely you're going to die. And then you might die a couple more times. And then when you finally get lucky enough to beat it, then you take, I think, like the jawbone of the lion. And that's the first weapon you've got. And so the game is very grindy in that way. And that's turns me off of some of these other games where it's probably very thematic, can really get caught up into the system, but it's a lifestyle game. Like you have to be willing to sit there and invest the time into discovering the best way to defeat that monster. And then you get to the next one, you're going to die to that one 3 or 4 times. And I guess there's some like system where once you get through one of those encounters, you go back to your village and you can upgrade your village. And so, you know, it's got, I think, some potential there, but agreed, Adam, definitely not the game for me. It didn't make my list, but it was close. And I think kind of the same reason why Seventh Continent didn't make my list here is because I'm still just slightly intrigued to try it, you know, and see if the system's cool, but I can't see ever putting the effort into going back and getting the full experience out of it. So why bother doing it?
Mm-hmm.
My number 3 game on the list is Pandemic Legacy Season 2. Pandemic Legacy Season 0 could qualify here. And the reason I'm picking these both is because I have played Pandemic Season Legacy 1, or at least a few games of it. You know, listen, Pandemic's a fine co-op. It's a great way to introduce people to hobby. It adds some tension. It's a fun little romp. Pandemic Season Legacy 1 adds the cool part about legacy mechanisms, which is that you do something and it has a consequence. It changes the board state permanently. That's all fun and great, but it forces you to play through 12 to 24 games of Pandemic, and that's just it's not fun enough to go back to that many times. And so I have even less interest in going back to Pandemic Legacy Season 2 or Season 0. I'm good. I'm done with the whole system. It's a shame that they're taking up spots where much more interesting and novel games could be on this list instead of having 3 with Pandemic Legacies on them. So Pandemic Legacy Season 2, I will never play because there's no way I'm going to go through the whole campaign. And if you're not going to do that, then why even start it?
Man, I wish that I hadn't played Pandemic Legacy Season 1 just so I could say how much I don't want to play it. I tried to get through this game, this campaign with my wife, and I cannot believe that this game is actually as high as it is on the BGG Top 100. Was it number 2?
Yeah.
It's insane. I mean, I'm not going to get into it because I'm totally off topic now, but I second your emotion on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a good reason. Like when Pandemic first came out, it was pretty novel. Like the idea of a co-op game at all was pretty novel, and it was a tense and interesting game. It was one of the first games I got introduced to back in, it was probably 2007, 2008. Me and my wife played the original Pandemic quite a bit and had a fun time with it. Looking back now, it's not that interesting, right? Like it's kind of repetitive gameplay. And you have to think, Chris, back to Pandemic Legacy Season 1 comes out, and it was basically the first legacy style game. Like there is a story that's told through there. And I know you got further through the campaign than I did, but I was enjoying, hey, I just met a new character and I get to upgrade them, and oh, like, that city just got destroyed. And so there are things that are changing there that we've experienced in legacy games since then that don't seem as novel. But I think that the reason why it's rated so high is that I think a lot of people had a really novel storytelling experience in this game that they had not ever gotten from a board game before. So I mean, Season 0 just came out last year or a year and a half ago or something like that, and it's on the top 100. So still a very popular series.
Well, it deserves to decline on the list, in my humble opinion. So that said, my number 2 is one that we've already heard about this evening, and that is Twilight Imperium. And my reasoning for not wanting to play this is basically the same thing that Adam already said, which, although he didn't drive him away from this game, it's the playtime. I mean, this game, it starts at 240 minutes on the BGG listing. I mean, my goodness. That's the starting time. That's 4 hours. 4 hours of your day, and it goes up to 480, which in reality, for us means like 24 hours. So there's that. I also, for some reason, I just cannot take seriously that anthropomorphic lion that they have on the front of the box cover. That just absolutely drives me crazy. I'm not sure why. But yeah, it seems like there's a lot of things about this game that I would love. The grand story, the exploration, so much of this, the area control. But I just figure there's so many good games out there that already do those things in a much more svelte and efficient way. Why would I want to throw myself into an 8-hour game when I can do the same thing in 2 hours with Eclipse or, name your game?
Yeah, those are all fair complaints, Chris, for sure. My number 2 least want to play game off the top 100 is Maracaibo. This is a game by Alexander Pfister and publisher by Games Up. This is sitting at number 42, and the theme here is set in the Caribbean during the 17th century, which is not a theme that I can get all that jazzed about unless it's trying to educate me and it's handled with tremendous care and caution. But I'm not a big fan of Alexander Pfister's game anyway. I play Great Western Trail. A lot of people love it. You go around in a circle, and it's boring. You go and do this action, and maybe you can do a slightly better action next time around, and you deliver some stuff, and you get some stuff, you trade some other stuff, move up this little thing. I've heard Tim talk about this one. It doesn't seem like Tim is even interested in this one too much anymore. Maybe he is. That's Maracaibo. I don't want to play this one.
So, Adam, when we played and discussed Great Western Trail on the podcast, you said, yeah, you know what, I could get into this a little bit more. Like, I had fun with it. And then we played it again after, and you said, no, I don't like it. It's not for me. So you're not a fan of Great Western Trail in any case. Maracaibo is not going to change your mind. I think Great Western Trail is the better game of the two. This has a little bit of a different system. It's got a little bit of a card and tableau building system to go along with the going around loops, but I think the going around loops is less interesting than Great Western Trail. So I agree. I wouldn't recommend it to you. I don't think you'll like it.
I see on the cover there's a giant looking Columbus looking sailing ship heading into some Spanish colonial island in the Caribbean there. What's going on there?
Yeah, who knows? But by the way, this has my least favorite combat system of any game that I've ever played. It's a really obnoxiously obtuse combat system that isn't fun or interesting in any way.
Okay.
That's saying something.
My number 2 game is a game that we've heard about tonight. On the flip side, Food Chain Magnate, ranked number 33. This is on Chris's list. And Chris, yeah, the style, right? This 50s style is right up your alley. You love this stuff. But I think aside from that little bit of a glimpse of it, the production it looks terrible. It looks like cheap little cardboard shits everywhere. Takes several hours to play from what I understand. A mean game where the person who doesn't know how to play the game is going to lose miserably, basically be knocked out in minutes. And then if you want to try it again to get better, you got to play for another 3-4 hours. Don't even put this on the table in front of me. I will never play this game with you guys. It is supposed to be, an economic simulation, which is never interesting to me in the first place. That's why I was so resistant to Smartphone Inc. But at least Smartphone Inc. is a quick, fun little game. There's nothing quick and, from what I can tell, fun about this game at all. So no, thank you, not for me. I'll pass.
Say how you feel, Tim. Be honest with us. Well, there, that solves that problem. I will be playing Food Chain Magnate with you guys. So, but that's okay. And that brings us to kind of like the pinnacle of the upside down pyramid here. The games that are at the very bottom. And before I get into my number one, I need to tell you a little story. So back in the 80s when I was a kid, there came U2's The Joshua Tree. And everybody said, if you didn't like U2's The Joshua Tree, you weren't even human. If you didn't have the t-shirt with the Joshua Tree on it, then you weren't even a person. You couldn't be anybody in high school. And I hated that. I hated it with a passion. And I mean, it's a great album. I mean, The Joshua Tree is a great album. I mean, as an adult now, I can look at it and say, there is so much good stuff happening there. What in the world was I talking about? But there's just a little bit of dissonant in me that says if something's that popular, there's got to be something wrong with it. I'm not sure I want to expose myself to it. It's funny because Tim's poll from a couple weeks ago was that, how does the position on the top 100 list affect your willingness to play a game? And generally speaking, I would say that, I'm not that influenced by it one way or the other, except in the case of my number one least want to play game, which is also the number one game on BGG, which is Gloomhaven. And I just am sick to death of hearing about Gloomhaven. And it's a co-op game, so I have a good excuse for not wanting to play Gloomhaven. And there's just nothing about it that catches my attention. It sounds bloated. It's awfully expensive. Could do without that. And I just don't want to have a Joshua Tree t-shirt. I mean, I just don't want to play Gloomhaven. Period.
I am right there with you, Chris. This would have been on my list if it had been 6 or 7 that we were picking, but we're only allowed to pick 5. I know, having said that, I have Frosthaven on the way. What am I going to do with that? If that ever arrives, I don't know. I guess I'll dig into it and try to make the best of it.
Yeah, Gloomhaven's a fun system. It's a good system, but it does get grind. I've only played Jaws of the Lion, which is a more streamlined version of it, and I've had fun digging into it a little bit, but I did get tired. For me, I also have Frosthaven on the way, and I'm hopeful that version 2.2 is going to be an improvement. Not that hopeful. I don't expect that I'm going to be blown away by it, but I'm excited to dig into Frosthaven for a few scenarios. That said, Gloomhaven almost made my list, mainly because I've already played Jaws of the Lion and don't want a bigger, longer, older version of that. And I've got Frosthaven coming. I'd much rather explore that than Gloomhaven. So I'll probably never play Gloomhaven, but it's a cool system. I definitely wouldn't say it's a bad game. If you're interested at all in it, it's a very fun system. If you want to go through 200 hours of content, kind of doing the same tactical combat system, it's a great tactical combat system, but it's not for me. So we'll see how Frosthaven is.
200 hours worth of tactical combat. Who wouldn't want to do that?
Well, my number one least favorite game with 0 tactical combat, as far as I can tell, is Caverna, the Cave Farmers, or Agricola. Take your pick. I think these are like the same game. I don't know. They're just as ugly as each other. Caverna here is ranked at number 35. It says Uwe Rosenberg. The artist here is Clemens Franz. So that adds to the distaste right away. I don't think I like Uwe Rosenberg at all. Feast for Odin, we've been trying it lately. It's just not fun. I don't get it. Like, what do you do in this game? You're probably going to struggle to farm some stuff, and then you can make some animals. You can have some animals breed. You can farm some more boring stuff in this ugly world of art on this grid system. Tell me how this game is. I've heard so many people say this game is great, but I don't understand the appeal. If you guys have any desire to play this game, let me know where that desire comes from. I'm sure I need to try it at least once to see what everybody's talking about and to make sure my distaste is legitimized. That's Caverna. the cave farmers.
Okay, so I'm going to speak to this a little bit. Now, I haven't played Caverna, but I've played Agricola quite a few times. And I just went back to it recently. I went and played on Board Game Arena with a few listeners because I hadn't played it for 6-7 years. It was one of the first hobby games I got introduced to. And it's actually a really, really good game. Agricola is. And the reason it's good is that it's a worker placement game, but it's like what I loved about Dune Imperium is that every worker placement spot at least has a very different impact. Like, and it's got a lot of this, like, if nobody takes a spot this round, then you add more stuff to it, kind of like the Dune Spice thing does. So it's got a lot of it's what makes a worker placement good, which is tension. The tension of, like, if I take this spot, I am giving up 2 other things because they're not going to be there when I come back around. And Agricola does that great. That said, it is a little bit outdated. It's a little redundant. And I would never say you have to go and play this. Caverna is supposed to take the same thing, but more along the lines of a Feast for Odin, where all of the actions are available for you to build out. Like, it's not, it's just like the options are all there. You can kind of build up your own little worker placement tableau. But it sounds like a mess of huge setup, tons of decision space to try to process early on. I've got a Feast for Odin. I'm happy to play that. I probably don't need to go back and play Caverna, so I'm not going to talk you into it. But listen, Agricola was one of the early Euros, one of the early worker placement games, and still holds up pretty well today.
Okay.
All right, so my number 1 game also has been talked about a couple times today, and it's funny because I mentioned number 33 on the list was Food Chain Magnate. I've played almost every game south of that, aside from just a couple. And one of them makes my list, and that is number 6 on the Board Game Geek all-time list, Twilight Imperium 4th edition. And also, you could include Twilight Imperium 3rd edition, which was higher on the list, but why bother doubling down on this? Yeah, so imagine, Chris, that we're sitting there playing Arcs tonight, right? And about halfway through the game, you're pretty frustrated because you feel like you've kind of lost your options. You've been taken out. There's not much you can do. Now imagine if that game was 6 to 8 hours long and about 2 hours into it, you realized that you're pretty much taken out of the game and there's not a whole lot you can do at this point. That's what Twilight Imperium is and why I will never, ever play this game.
That's when you make your dramatic run to go from last place to first place in the final 10 hours of the game.
No, I think that's when you make your dramatic run to Burgerville to go get dinner.
Yeah, no interest. It's too long to even explore a system that is full of luck, full of heavy conflict. It's just absolutely not the game for me, and it's way too long to even want to give it a shot. Give me any 1 to 2 hour game, even if I'm not. I'll play Barrage with you guys because it doesn't look fun to me, but I could be totally wrong, and it's worth an hour or 2 to try it out. Twilight Imperium is not worth it for me. There's no way I'm going to spend 6 to 8 hours playing something I don't think I'm interested in playing. So fire it. So that will wrap up all of our analysis of the top 100 games on the Board Game Geek greatest games of all time list. In probably just a couple of weeks, we're going to start our top 30 board games of all time list. And we're going to do that over 3 segments. So watch for that. That's going to be really fun. And then following up on that is going to be our 100th episode of all time. And our 100th episode is going to be your favorite games of all time. We're going to be asking our listeners to tell us what your favorite games are. And we're going to kind of compare those to how our final lists were. And we're going to kind of respond to them and give our thoughts on your list. So looking forward to getting some of your feedback and hearing from you all. So that's coming up pretty soon. Until next week, take care, everybody.
Good night, all.
Bye-bye.